We are live.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. First item is the adoption of the agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand and Joni will count. Can we get 7?
Motion passed. Yes, 7-0.
Okay. The first item and only item is the COVID update. I'll turn it over to Fred.
Okay, everything is always so easy around here, isn't it, folks? So we'll look at the trend data from Harvey County, or the 3 criteria. Do you want to look at the actual data, or do you want to review real quickly the gating criteria? You have a preference?
I think it wouldn't be bad to review the gating criteria, Fred.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. That way we can get through everything here. Can you see the gating criteria there? Oh, no, if I would have shared it, it would have worked just perfectly.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So the 4 different modes, green, yellow, orange, and red, in terms of learning activities, spectators being present. Do we need any review on any of these particular areas? Are you all good? Okay. Then we'll go down to the different types of Dual Credit Opportunity Academy. Once again, fairly self-explanatory. This is the fun piece. The district grading criteria in terms of absenteeism. Green, if you're 3% or less in terms of the building, or district staff, or not district staff, the teaching absenteeism rate, because that's one that's really quick to quantify. Yellow, 3 to 3.59% variance. Orange, 6 to 9.9% variance, and then red if we're 10 above or outside of that ADA in terms of attendance. The 2-week percent positive, less than 5% for green, 5.1 to 9.9 yellow, 10 to 14, 0.9 orange, and then greater than 15, greater than or equal to 15 is red. The trend in the county incident rate, the 2-week comparison, decreasing, stable, and increasing. This will be the fun one tonight. We get to the other 2 that we just kind of use as a validation. We look at the 2-week cumulative county incidence rate, the new cases per 100,000, and that's over the prior 2 weeks. 0 to 50 green, 51 to 100 yellow, 101 to 150 orange, and then greater than 151 red. We look at the local referring hospital capacity, green 30%. That one's a tough one just because of the way you have to look at that. We're just using the dashboard essentially. Yellow, 20.9 to 20% available, 19.9 to 10% available, and then less than 10% in red. So now, any questions about, we should look at the little chart thing. And this is for the color ranges for the 3 criteria. All 3, green, so on and so forth. I'm sure you guys have this memorized. If you don't have it in front of you, I can leave it kind of up on the screen and off to the side here where you can see it when we look at the other criteria or the other information. Okay, can you see both of them there right now? Okay. So when we look at the first piece of data, which is that the trend, this is the one that's going to be a discussion point tonight. As I have done ever since we started keeping track of this wonderful data, I've looked at when we were first meeting with the Harvey County Health Department, the way they told us to calculate the trend was to look at 2 weeks worth of data, for example. It's not going to let me do it the way I want to. Like from Friday the 16th of October through Saturday the 3rd, count the number of cases that were new according to their site, then compare that to the previous 2 weeks, which is the 2nd of October all the way through the 19th of September, I don't know why it did that. And so when you look at that, you had the previous 2 weeks, the most recent 2 weeks, 101. The 2 weeks prior to that, 30 in terms of new cases. So in terms of the change in that time frame, we had 71 new cases. When you go, and that's what it says there at number 1. When you go to the Harvey County dashboard, it says disease spread. It has it right in the middle in terms of it being yellow. When you look at the KEHE site in terms of disease spread, it has it in a decline, okay? And that's a pretty nice nice slope in terms of it being an actual decline. Okay, this is that. If you guys remember, Karen was keeping that every day. She was updating that Desmos. It's that online. It'll give you the slope calculation for the change in cases. And what I did was I went through, because I've had a couple of phone calls from some people. Hey, that looks like it's stable, and it does. It does, and it doesn't. It does, and it depends on where you look at it. When you look at what was produced over the course of the same 2 week period, October 3rd to the 16th, there's an average slope increase of 0.45. Okay? Now, that can be either, that's generally considered stable. Anything a 0.5 to a 0 to a negative 0.5 in terms of the slope of that line, you could consider that stable. Anything over a 0.5 or anything under a negative 0.5, that's going to be either increasing or decreasing. Okay? So the fun part about this is, are we orange or are we yellow? Right? When I look at that, I consider it to be orange only from the perspective that when you look at the case count above here, from that 2 week comparison to the previous 2, that's a pretty large increase in number of cases. Even though when you also look at that slope as of late, that slope is decreased dramatically. But it didn't decrease until after the 13th of October. It was on a real steady increase for that full week, which we know was that cluster of students, a lot of them representing Bethel College. Sorry to the Bethel people, okay? A lot of them representing Bethel College. So that's why this isn't as cut and dry as it could be in terms of that increase. And I'll open the floor for questions on this.
Fred, I have a question. If you go back to the top where you have the data, what's the difference between the two tables, just pulling it at different times?
Great question, yeah. Originally, we didn't necessarily have a lot of data available on the Sunday before, so I was always going Friday to Friday. If you look back in the previous gating criteria that I've shared with you guys, I've always had the Friday to Saturday grouping. But since the last 2 weeks, they've also had the Sunday information there. I've just included that as another data piece in there. Does that make sense?
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions on this piece? I guess not.
Okay.
So we're at a orange yellow there, right, Fred?
Yep.
Okay. And then the other 2 you felt were a little more easier?
Pretty cut and dry. And that's
Okay.
another one of those things, yeah. It's pretty cut and dry. 15.54%, okay, for the 2 week positive. And once again, the bigger offender here was that week of October 4th, okay? We're under 10% for that week of October 11th, and we know that's going to go down. So that's clearly an orange. When we look at staff attendance, the normal is 10.87. We're at 19%. So 8.13 over the normal in terms of attendance. So that when you look at our chart there, we're on that orange level there. For students, we still got a good student attendance rate at 92.11. And the question was asked, do we count the quarantines in that? We do not count those students that were excluded if they're working from home in that remote mode, just like what we're doing with remote students. So that reason, or that's pretty stable right there. So when I look at attendance, you know, it's green for the students, okay? But when you look at that for the orange, for the staff, so I put the overall attendance as yellow. The overall attendance is yellow. So when you look at that from the perspective of the 3 data points, we have either 1 green, 1 orange, and 1 yellow, or we have 2 orange and 1 yellow. Is that right? Am I thinking that right?
Mm-mm.
2 orange and 1 yellow. So once again, and I'll be honest with you, another one of the reasons why, you know, I lean towards the 2-week being the one on top being more an orange than a yellow is because of this real high percent positive. And then we start looking at our absence rate for staff. That's a pretty high absentee rate. You know, our students, it's great, but it's a pretty high absenteeism rate. We look at the other 2 pieces of information, the per 100,000. Over the 2-week period with 101 cases, it puts us about 295.9. That's if you do it proportionally with the 34,129 that I've always used there. Local referring capacity, it's listed as green on our dashboard. So, other pieces of information. Quarantine stats, as of Friday, this past Friday, because they're not always updated like at the end of the day, we had 132 students this past Friday. We had 20 staff this past Friday, but I know that number now that are being excluded is 30 to 31. We've had 11 positive cases as of today, 12 if you count the one before school started, which I keep lopping off. So we have staff cases, 2 elementary, 2 middle, and 1 high school. Student cases, 2 elementary, 1 middle, and 4 high school. I don't mind identifying the levels here because we have at least 2 of each one of the levels. We've got 2 high schools, we've got 2 middle school levels, and so they're not identifiers. That's the only reason I'm telling you what levels we have there. Do you have any other questions?
Well, so to summarize, Fred, is it correct to say we got, for the 2-week positive, we've got an orange. For the faculty and student building percentage, we've got a yellow.
Yes, sir.
And then for the incident rate, increase, decrease, stable, we've got an orange/yellow.
Yep. That's how I look at it.
Okay. So we're really right on the line. Is that your...
Yeah, we're really right on that line. We really are.
Okay.
You know, and some of the things to throw it over, if you need something to throw it over, you know, once again, our hospital referring capacity is good, but that 2-week cumulative incident rate is still pretty darn high.
Hey Fred, it's Mallory.
Yep.
Can you explain to me where you got the 295.9? Because when I look on the KDHE for the new case rates per 100,000, they have us at 206.
Well, is it 2 week or is it 1 week that you're looking at?
Well, and that's what I'm wondering what dates you're using.
I just use the 2 weeks. What I do is I take this 101 right here, what they show as the new cases from the 2 calendar dates, and then I just do the math. I just put them in proportionally. 101 as to 34,129 as blank is to 100,000.
And they're doing 14 days as well, so they must be starting at a different date than you, something.
This is how I've calculated this consistently the whole time. And
Okay.
you know, it could be that, seriously, folks, I got this 34,129, you know, off of, oh gosh, where was it? It was an online source for what's the population of Harvey County. So it's around 34,000, I know. But I've used this the whole time. But even so, when you look at that, anything over 151 is in the red in that category.
It does keep us in the same color, absolutely. I just wondered why their number was 206 and yours was 295. So it could be, like you're saying, a slight difference in our overall population and or the date that you guys are each using as a starting point.
That's the hard part. Like I've talked to a couple of you this afternoon, you can go to either site or any site, KDHE or the Harvey County one, and you look at data at different times of the day, you're going to get some different data sometimes for the same time frames and stuff. So, and if you look back over recent gating criteria that I've shared with you, you'll see that same thing. The numbers aren't always the same. Like if you were to look at the Friday, October the 2nd, the Saturday, September 19th, that's not 30 anymore, I don't believe. You know what I mean? In previous ones that we've put out. So.
And so I guess where we're at, folks, is we just need to decide whether we want to go orange or yellow. I think you could call it either way. I think we're right on the line here. So I'll either entertain a motion, or if anybody's got any statements or discussion you want to make, that's fine.
I'm thinking that.
I'll throw my 2 cents in real quick. Sorry, I can't even see who else is talking with the screen, so sorry for interrupting. But when we met a week ago, we had 56 active cases, and I think we're at 33 as of today. So it's hard for me to put that, as far as trend increasing or decreasing, it's hard for me to say orange when, like I said, in just 1 week we dropped 23 cases. The other 2 criteria, yeah, attendance, yellow, percent positive, can't hardly argue with that. It's orange. So the way I see it is 2 yellows and an orange, and that would put us in yellow. So that's
Okay. Anybody else?
This is Melissa, and I was just going to say that we stay in orange for families and the teachers planning, because that they've already planned for this week, and then they'd have another week in the orange, and then see where we're at. That's kind of what we heard from them, that they, wanted a longer period of time in changing. Otherwise, I would say yellow.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think you can make a good argument either way for yellow or orange. I always want to lean more towards yellow, only because it helps keep our K-6 in the buildings, which is the most vulnerable. And we've talked about this at length, about we don't want them to be at home by themselves. I have heard from a couple of teachers that they really desire that we make the decisions for 2 weeks at a time, just to ease their planning stress, and they already have a lot on their plates. So I would encourage, and I liked that in the beginning, to make sure we extend it for a longer length of time, so parents and staff members have a little more time to plan. So.
Sorry, this is Mallory. In looking at all of this, I appreciate Luke's comment, kind of looking big picture at things. I think it's a little different right now, since we're still working through the tail end of a large cluster. That always throws us for a loop, because that cluster is not necessarily representative of widespread community virus spread. So that's definitely something to take into consideration. I'm hearing from staff as well that it's really difficult to be in orange right now for a large section of our teachers. They want their kiddos to be safe, absolutely. But they also know that kids learn best in our classrooms. That's one thing. We've mentioned this in meetings before. one thing we do well is teach kids in the classroom, and I'm not pushing for them to be there if it's not safe, not for a second, because I throw my own children into this group in this conversation. But in looking at the numbers that we've been presented and overall, and still falling into that stable category, especially seeing how those numbers break down over the past few days, that we are seeing a decline. We know that that spike was a cluster. We know where that was located. I'm leaning more towards the yellow.
Okay.
One other quick point. Definitely take into consideration the fact that we still haven't had a transmission within our schools. What our staff, what our people are doing is working. And yes, like Mallory said, we don't want to send kids into a building if we thought it wasn't safe. So what we are doing is working. There's been no transmission within the schools. And I do think it's a safe environment, possibly more safe than the other environments that these students might be in if they're out of school.
Luke, I know you can't see me shaking my head. Yes, in agreement. But yeah, thanks for bringing up that point. That is really, really positive that we're not seeing extra transmission from our positive cases. I think that's really, really important.
Okay.
I'm leaning towards yellow myself. And so I understand the 2 weeks thing, though. That's pretty tough. And I also lean on the safety and some of the calls and some of the concerns I have for the little kiddos. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. And I also, too, am thinking yellow here. I think Luke's got a really good point. And we need to do our most that we can to keep those younger ones in. So
I'll just say quickly, I support staying in orange. I feel like when you look at the data tables at the top of the trend, like that's what we should be basing it off of. There's just pure numbers to interpret and to look at graphs or to look at all these Desmos calculations. And then also on the 2 week positivity, 2 week positive percentage, like we're almost at 15. That's pretty high to be at 14.5 is almost 15. So that's pretty alarming to me. Also, I know we don't take into consideration this one, but the 2 week cumulative incident rate is red if we were to look at that one as well. And then Fred, could you clarify on the staff and student attendance data on point C? You say overall status with the trend this past week, this will change drastically. What does that mean? That data is going to get worse when we look at this next time, or better? You're muted.
It's because I don't want you to hear what I'm saying. You know, it's just like today, we had an increase of 10 staff. You know, last week it jumped from like kids to 130 some within a week's time. So it can change drastically either way.
Okay.
That's the scary thing in terms of that attendance thing. I'm more worried, just like as I had said last week in my Friday notes, about having to look to either open a building or keep it closed, or go totally remote based upon losing, a third of the staff. So that's just something we're going to have to watch. That student attendance rate is pretty positive, though, that it's steady.
Okay. I mean, I just feel like we're right on the edge here, and because of that, and then also because of like keeping some kind of stability for our families and for our teachers, and then the fact that our staff has caught this, that really, really concerns me, because I know some of them are older and could have other health conditions or people in their homes, that weighs heavily on me, that staff members have caught it. And I'm not saying they've caught it at school or anything, but I mean, it's there. I just feel like we're so close that we should play it safe and stick with orange for the next week.
And I think, this is Mallory again, I think we need to be really careful when we look at those numbers of students and staff, because that, just because they're in the quarantine, that does not mean that they've caught it. It means that they could have been identified as a close contact, and that's why they're quarantined. We don't know.
Not the case count, not the quarantine numbers. He has the case numbers on there as well, on the very last sentence. So I'm not talking about quarantine. I understand that. Just that we have staff and students that have tested positive, and we're at a breaking point, I feel like, in our community, that we should be careful.
And like Luke said, I think it's great to show and highlight that, unfortunately, when we have had cases, the transmission beyond that, we haven't seen it. So definitely keeping up our mitigation practices as we have been has been really important, and continuing to do that. Unfortunately, we have cases, but it seems to be stopping earlier rather than spreading beyond, so that's great.
And I'm just supportive of Fred's recommendation and what the numbers are pretty much telling us to stay in orange for at least another week.
I think, has everyone talked? I've got the Brady Bunch view, so I'm looking at everybody. I think everybody's been able to say something. Are we ready for a motion?
Sure.
This one? Okay. I move back to my board docs. I move to approve the yellow mode of learning beginning October 26th and doing that for 2 weeks to provide a little bit longer, some consistency for families and staff.
Second.
Okay. So moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll go ahead and call the vote. Luke,
Aye.
your vote. Andy,
Yeah.
Angela,
No?
Melissa,
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry, yes.
Jennifer,
Aye.
Mallory,
Aye.
and I'm a yes. So the motion carries 6-1. There's nothing further, is there, Fred?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, raise your hand for Joni. All right. Thank you, everybody.
7-0.